So we also need to understand that none of us have either a pure fixed mindset or a growth mindset. We are all on a continuum, and it usually depends on the situation that we are facing, right? It doesn't mean that it's bad if you're on a fixed mindset. It just means now you know how you can work towards developing more of a growth mindset. And remember, growth mindset, fixed mindset is not just about your studies and your academics, right? It's also about when you go for a job interview and you don't get the job, or you're not shortlisted, or you're not the successful candidate. You don't just give up, because that would be having a fixed mindset. What you do is you reflect and you say to yourself, what could I have done better in that interview? What could I have done differently in that interview? How could I have prepared differently for that interview? And so that the next interview that you're going to, the next job that you're going to apply for, you are then a little bit better prepared. And you'll find no one ever just gets the first job they apply for. There are people that do, but not everyone. And so you find that as you prepare for the next one and the next one, you get better and better and better at it, which then changes your attitude. It changes your belief about yourself. Because if you go for one interview and you don't get it, and your belief is that I fail at everything, I'm just never going to get that job. What does that do to the next time you apply? You walk into that interview with that same negative fixed mindset belief, right? So it's important to practice purposeful engagement. What does that mean? Use the feedback and the mistakes you've made as opportunities to improve. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're somebody that's in a master's or doing a PhD, you will understand that you will get, your supervisor will send your proposal or your concept paper to you back over and over and over again, to a point where you feel like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'm good at writing. I don't think I'm good at research. You will, if you anticipate that you will get critical feedback, it's important, because they're developing your theoretical idea into your research. They're helping you to focus it. So if your perception focuses on that, okay, that's growth mindset. Compared to if you say, well, you know what, I'm just dumb, I can't do this. I'm not cut out for masters, I'm not cut out for PhD. Obviously, that's a fixed mindset. Obviously, you're not going to move past the first part or the first phase, which is the concept paper, into the proposal, because you're reluctant to take feedback, right? You believe the feedback that you're getting means that you remember the black and white thinking, that you either know how to do research or you don't know how to do research. You're either cut out for PhD or you're not cut out for PhD. So people who practice purposeful engagement, they use that feedback. They try and listen with the third ear to the supervisor. What's the supervisor trying to say? That I'm all over the place. Let me focus this more, so I can improve this concept paper so that it can evolve into a proposal. Same with the proposal, so that it can evolve into chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3, right? So the process of learning is what you start focusing on and enjoying more, and then you become a lot more productive, as opposed to becoming somebody that's demotivated and giving up. So that means we also believe that we can overcome obstacles, because we're choosing, right? You're choosing, and it is a choice, to learn from that experience, to work harder, to put in the effort, to try again. Because what is your end goal? Your end goal is, I want a master's degree, or I want a PhD degree, or I want an honors degree, or I want a degree, right? But the purpose is that if you're somebody that's stuck in a fixed mind or set way of thinking, you're never going to get there, because you don't believe that trying is important. You believe that trying is an insult to you. You believe that trying is a reflection of your competence, whereas it isn't, right? And the moment you make that shift, it means that your mind is beginning to think in a way that's growth oriented, right? It means never having to give up, no matter what happens. And I think, when you start understanding that you can learn anything that you put your mind to, right? You understand that the difference between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. You realize, one, that intelligence is fixed. If you believe that intelligence is fixed, it results in a negative way of thinking, which then impacts the way in which you behave, which is usually in a negative way. You also, if you recognize that intelligence can be developed over time, it then leads to a positive change, right? And when you make this realization, And that shift from the fixed mindset to the growth mindset, Dweck says this is called an aha moment. When you realize that intelligence can be grown if I put in the effort and if I do the learning and if I do the necessary work, if I do the necessary preparation, whether it's an interview, whether it's your thesis, whether it's your studying, right? The other thing that's very important to realize is that mistakes are so important because it changes your brain. Remember the neuroplasticity I spoke about? Mistakes are important because we learn from them. That's what's important. It's not that you made the mistakes. Fixed mindset people focus on the mistake. Growth mindset people say, what can I learn from this mistake? And in doing that, they develop their brain. They change the neural pathway of their brain and they strengthen the synapses. They strengthen the connections in their brain. They change the default in the brain, right? So let's just quickly move on to how then can you cultivate a growth mindset so that you can contribute to your success, whatever that may be, right? However you may define it. How do you then cultivate this mindset? So I spoke about the power of yet. So this is the belief that while you may not be able to do something just straight away, you understand that if I put in the time, if I put in the effort, I can achieve it. So what does that mean? When we are confronted with something that we can't do, instead of saying, I can't do this, you utilize the power of yet and you say, I can't do this yet. I can't write a literature review. I can't do this literature review yet. I can't pass this module. I can't pass this module yet. What does that do? Okay, it infuses a sense of hope. It infuses a sense that I can set goals, I can work on improving and on the skills that I haven't mastered yet, right? For example, if you haven't mastered a sport or playing the piano, you can say something like, I haven't mastered it yet, because remember, we're changing the neural pathways to, I can't do this, I haven't mastered this, to new neural pathways, to saying, but I will keep on practicing. So if you're somebody that has a dialogue with yourself, we all do that. I talk about having conversations with yourself. And I talk from the point of view of people that are coming to therapy who come in really demotivated, really depressed, believing that they are failures. You find that their internal dialogue is one that's very negative. They put themselves down. They are their own harshest critic. And when they listen to their inner critic, I ask them to change what they think, the way they think, to a different way of thinking, right? So if you're somebody that says, I can't do this, I will teach you how to say, I can't do this yet, or I will keep on practicing. I don't understand this module. I don't understand this section, but I will learn it with time. So when you start adding that on, your brain starts changing that neural pathway to somebody that feels incompetent, believes they're incompetent, and behaves like they're incompetent, okay, and then gives up. It starts changing over time because you're strengthening the neural pathways, okay? And you are doing things in order to, you're not just saying the words, you're setting goals, you're putting in the work, you're putting in the effort, right? You start seeing yourself as a work in progress. So that means you will continuously develop. You start reframing. Cognitive reframing is so important in this process of moving from negative affirmation to positive affirmation. You reframe the weakness as strengths, right? And the skills that you are developing. Remember, everything is a work in progress. Every single thing that you do. When you start first year, your degree is a work in progress. You're not just going to get there without any kind of effort, right? So you're acknowledging where you are right now, and then that gives you the assurance or the reassurance and motivation for continued growth, continued development. Grit is another thing that's so important. I think when we cultivate grit, we understand that perseverance and passion is needed for us to be able to achieve those long-term goals. And this is something that Angela Duckworth talks about in terms of grit, right? So grit really is composed of committing to long-term goals, meaning that you will stay dedicated despite any setbacks that you have. For example, a PhD takes anywhere between 2 to 5 to 6 to 8 years for some people, right? But if you have grit, you stay in for the long haul. Resilience during adversity is another part of grit. It means that you keep going no matter what challenges you face. How do you build this grit? Break down your goals into milestones. And every time you achieve one of your milestones, you set a new one. You can view success as something that's a continuous process. It's not a destination. You must be realistic about what amount of time you need. You cannot say, oh, I'm going to do my PhD in 1 year. I'm going to do it in 2 years. You have to factor in a whole lot of things, right? So you need to be very realistic about your time, because if you don't achieve it in that 1 year, you're going to feel like you're a failure. Meanwhile, you are unrealistic with your time frame, right? Similarly with other things, I'm going to get a job in the next 2 days. That's unrealistic. You know that. Set realistic time frames, right? Remember that grit is about consistency, consistent effort over time. It's not just about your talent. All of us have talent in different ways, but you've got to put in effort for anything that you want to achieve. Everyone knows that, right? But a lot of people don't practice that as often as they should. Shifting the mind is another technique, right? When you are stuck in a fixed mindset way of thinking, you give up, you don't try. So reframing or challenging your beliefs and and your thinking, so you can overcome this and any struggles that you might be having or any challenges you might be having, has a huge impact on your performance and your ability to succeed, right? Remember that your attitude is a better predictor of your results than your IQ. So how do we cultivate a mindset? So people with a growth mindset, instead of saying, I'm not good at this, rather say, what am I missing? Instead of saying, I give up, say, I'll use a different strategy, right? If you say it's good enough, ask yourself, is this really my best work? If you're somebody that says, I can't make this any better, start shifting, cognitively reframe that thought process and say, I can always improve. If you're somebody that constantly thinks, oh, this is too hard, change it to something like, this may take some time, right? If you're somebody that focuses on your mistakes, see it as mistakes help me to learn, right? So, and I'll leave you to read the rest. So the idea around cultivating the growth mindset is attunement to your thought process, understanding how much of your inner critic, how much it plays a role in how you think about your life, your studies, your goals, your aspirations. And once you're in tune with that, you can start working on changing and reframing how you think. And remember what I said, how you think influences your perceptions, right? Your perceptions changes your beliefs changes your attitude changes your mindset. Remember that failure can be a painful experience, but it shouldn't be something that defines who you are, right? It's something that happens to every one of us. It's something that has to be faced. It's something that has to be dealt with. It's something that has to be learned from. When you cultivate a positive mindset and you view failure as a welcome challenge and an opportunity to grow, you will not be fixated on the failing part. You will not be somebody that thinks in a black and white way that if I failed, it means that I'm not a successful person. And in this way, you are more likely to enjoy what you're doing, to enjoy the journey of learning. And you will seek out situations where you can, sorry, I just touched something here, where you can learn from and experiment in different kinds of situations. You will seek out those kind of situations where you can learn from it and you can and experiment from it. So how does a growth mindset change your point of view of failure? Remember, when you adopt a growth mindset, you're somebody that will say, okay, I have failed, but you're going to find inspiration from other people. You're not going to be threatened by other people's success. You're going to use it as an inspiration to keep improving, right? For example, if you got a C- on something, you're not going to see it as, your perception isn't going to be, oh, this is the end of the world. This is it. This is finite. I can't do better than a C-. You're going to be somebody that says, I haven't gotten a C+ yet. So a growth mindset is about not giving up. And knowing that learning from failure is what actually leads to eventual success. And as I said, this can be summed up when you use the word yet. In everything that you do that you haven't achieved, add the word yet to the end of that sentence and see how powerful that statement then becomes, how much more motivated and hopeful you start feeling because you realize, there's still a chance for me to pass that module, to ace that interview, to get that master's degree, right? You can also practice self-reflection, right? Self-reflection is so important too, so that you can learn from past mistakes, what worked for you, what didn't, and then you learn how to improve from that. Make sure you're focusing on effort, not just the outcome. You must celebrate all the effort that you've put in. Don't be sad about failing. Say, I worked really hard on that. I'm not happy with the result, but it means that I have more work to do, and I can do this differently so that I can achieve the outcome that I'm hoping for. When you adopt the power of yet, you shift from I can't to I can't do this yet. Set learning goals. This means you prioritize skill building over performance, right? Surround yourself with growth mindset people is so important because then it allows you to engage with positive influences. Make sure that you are adaptable, that your mindset is malleable, and that you stay flexible and open to change for success. When challenges come your way, embrace them, right? See them as opportunities. Don't see them as just obstacles, things that are coming in your way, or that it's bad luck, or nothing is ever going to come, work out for me. Embrace it. You start seeing that your whole mindset towards it starts changing, your whole attitude towards it changes. I mean, that changes. You become more productive and more willing to do something about it, right? When people give you criticism, learn from that feedback. It's not a personal attack. There are people that are bosses, for example, that constantly give them negative feedback. That's a different, unique story sometimes, A person might start feeling like I'm being picked on all the time. If there's a pattern there, examine yourself. Examine, have I created this pattern? Or is this person just not compatible with me and our personalities clash? That might be a totally different situation and might require totally different intervention. Make sure you're building resilience, so you treat failure as a learning experience, but you keep moving forward. Persistence is key, as is repetition, because when you do that, you understand that if I put in the effort, it's going to lead to long-term success and progress, right? Don't use words like I'm gifted or she's gifted, they talented, they smart, right? Avoid, even with your children, avoid results-based praise. Focus on their efforts. And I think that's more validating for them because remember, you are also creating through your interactions with your children, you're also creating either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset person. They're internalizing what you're saying. They are also watching what you say. When you get upset about failing, when you focus on validating yourself through your results, only when you pass, that children learn that as well, that I'm only valued if I do well. So focus on their efforts, even if they get C's and D's and E's and they didn't get A's like their brothers and sisters. Focus on the fact that they've put in the effort, and that's what's important, right? Yes, and you encourage them to continuously improving. It's not that you're accepting an E and an F. If a child has put in the effort, but the exam was difficult, you focus on the effort that they've put in, even for yourself. Because remember that even when they fail and even when they don't do as well as they had expected, it's all part of the learning process. Even when you're not great at something, it's challenging and you find that you can't do something, just embrace the imperfections. Just try harder. And a growth mindset is also accepting that sometimes I may not be good at something, and that's okay. A growth mindset isn't about I always have to achieve success or that I always have to put in the effort in order to achieve that success. That's not where the focus is. The focus of growth mindset is also to understand that not all of us can be doctors, not all of us can be engineers, and to be okay with that, right? To be accepting of that. Okay, I think I've mentioned some of these things. Choose learning well over learning fast. Making mistakes does not mean you're a failure. It just means you're on the right track. You're just not there yet. And remember that with a growth mindset, it empowers you to pursue your goals. Whereas when you have a fixed mindset, it stops you from pursuing your goals, right? Because there's a more stronger belief, there's a more stronger belief about who you are and your potential to grow and to succeed, right? It also makes you cultivate a sense of purpose in your life because you know what the end goal is. It doesn't have to happen at the end of that day or the end of that week or the end of that year. But you understand that there is a long-term goal in place for myself. And I know that all of the things that I need to do, I've put those out for myself and I've made them such that I'm able to achieve them. I haven't set up myself for failure, because often you find that people tend, because they failed before, because, for example, they've been told they're a failure, they've internalized that, they tend to engage in self-sabotage. So that, in a way, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the person doesn't put in the effort so that they can fail, they can sabotage themselves, and they can say, see, I don't have the intelligence. I don't have what it takes to complete this degree, to get that job, to be a great mother, to be a great partner, to complete my master's, to complete my PhD, and so forth. And I think that brings us to the end of this presentation. If there are any questions or answers, questions that you'd like to have, I'm happy to answer. Yes, our contact details, our telephone number for both campuses in Durban and Pietermaritzburg, our Counselling KZN inbox, as well as the QR code if you want to book an online session with any one of our counselors.
Thanks, Dr. Hendricks. Thanks so very much for the very informative presentation. Colleagues who are assisting on the technical aspect, do you have any direct questions on the chat box? Colleagues, my audible?
There's a question on the chat.
Okay, go ahead.
It says, how long might it take to change your mindset?
It depends on you. Remember, the brain is consistently evolving. Remember that we tend to default to old ways of thinking, especially when we met with failure or when we met with something that's negative. Our brain will default. And when your brain defaults, I haven't worked long enough. I haven't changed those neural pathways of mine. So if you're somebody that's always negative, you always put yourself down. Remember what I said, historically, it would have come from your childhood, from teachers, from peers, from parents who put you down, who haven't acknowledged your efforts, who haven't acknowledged and validated your performance, or parents who just base everything about performance. That will ensure that you get a fixed mindset. So if you're aware of that you would be aware of your own upbringing, right? If you're aware that that's how you were brought up, it means you've got to work extra hard to change that neural pathway, because that is your default. Every single time you don't get something that you really wanted, you will default to putting yourself down in the same way your parents or your peers or your teachers put you down. And so that attunement I talked about, that being aware of your dialogue, the conversations that you have with yourself. Dialogue is about, back and forth, right? The dialogue you have with yourself, the conversation you're having with yourself. If you are tuned to yourself, if you're aware of yourself, you'll start becoming aware of your thought process and how you actually are now your own parent, putting yourself down. You have become your own parent in putting whatever effort you put in, you start putting yourself down, right? And that's how you end up having that negative mindset, that fixed mindset. So the idea is to, through the process of attunement, to start saying, no, but I put in a lot of effort. I'm not there yet. I haven't passed that module yet. That does not mean I'm a failure. So you can't, every single day, you stand in front of a mirror, or you say that to yourself as you're riding in the taxi, as you driving your car, as you're having a shower, wherever you are, you keep on saying, the more you say to yourself, remember I said persistence, repetition is key. The more you say that to yourself, the more you start eliminating the old default way of thinking. The more you replace the old negative affirmations and statements about yourself and self-limiting beliefs, we call them, the more you start becoming a lot more positively affirming to yourself. So your voice is no longer the same voice it was before. It's a voice, your own voice, that's recognizing that you must remember, as a child, you were screaming out inside of yourself to be recognized for the little efforts you were making. Now you self-sabotage by doing that to yourself. So you need to stop that. The only way you can stop that is if you're attuned to yourself. I hope I'm making sense. And when you attune to yourself, you start turning that around and you affirm even the smallest effort you make. If you got out of bed that day and you got yourself to work for an hour, affirm yourself. If you did a summary of half a page, affirm yourself, because tomorrow you're going to want to do one more page because you see, oh, I did half a page. I'm building mastery here. The next day you're going to do 2 pages and so forth. And the more you do, the more you affirm yourself, the more effort you're going to put into it. And the more positive and the more confident you're going to become in your ability to get through that entire chapter, right? So you apply it to different situations, different circumstances, different challenges that you're experiencing in your life. I see someone asking, how can a person working work out a study plan, and is there counseling sessions available? Yes, Laverne. In fact, we've had study skills workshops. There's new ones coming on. Power of Study groups is also going to be coming on soon. There's also our YouTube channel where you can go back and you can have a look at the study skills that is done, where we do a study plan. There was time management that has also been done. There's goal setting that's also been done during March and April. Every year we do these workshops. We'll also be doing them in the second semester again. And if you feel that, those workshops haven't assisted you, yes, the information in the chat as well as what I shared, you can book. Let me check if I got. You can book a session with a counselor, and so then they can help you specifically with your particular issue. So there's back on the screen again. I haven't stopped sharing. Oh. So if you just, pull out your phone and you click the QR code, it'll take you to the online booking app where you can book an appointment. Right, and there's another question. What does this person say? So if you study less, your brain will adapt to the situation. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, it'll adapt to that situation. It won't put in the effort. Okay, any other questions, Inga?
There's a question that says, how effective are affirmations said out loud than affirmations in thoughts? Is there a difference?
Say that again, Inga. I didn't hear you. I was reading something.
How effective are affirmations said out loud than affirmations in thought? Is there a difference?
I don't know if there's a difference, but I certainly believe that whether you're doing it, because remember, even when if your unconscious negative thoughts have a power to sway the way you think and the way you feel and the way you behave, then I would think that an unconscious positive thought, whether conscious or unconscious, also has the same level of power to change and to sway the way you think.
Another question. I've always had this habit of adapting a teacher's attitude towards the subject. If she or he is enthusiastic, then I would do really well in subject. But if the teacher is negative, it would reflect in my result. So I wanted to ask, how do I escape this cycle?
I don't think you can answer that question fully in this kind of session. I mean, I would encourage the person to work very closely with a counselor, because often that is a long-term issue. It doesn't just come from that situation. It comes from many different kinds of experiences, often from childhood. There's a lot of processing that needs to happen. so that you can understand where those affirmations, where those indoctrinations have come from. I'm going to just post something here. Oh no, it didn't work. You understand where the affirmations, the negative affirmations have come from. And in that way, you start looking, for example, let's say your thought is that I'm stupid or I'm a failure. We try and unpack that with you in a session to understand where does that thought process come from? Who is the person that was your significant other? Was it a father, a mother, an aunt, an uncle, a peer, a teacher? Who said this to you, somebody that you obviously admired, you looked up to, that you took that statement from them and you internalized that statement. And it actually is a statement that's so strong and powerful that it influences everything you say and do and the decisions you make. We start looking at other evidences in your life where you were not a failure, where where you have succeeded, because remember, people tend to overgeneralize. People tend to magnify their faults and their failures. And when you come into therapy, you start understanding that there are other situations where I was not a failure, where I actually did well, but I didn't acknowledge that because my mind was so focused and it was so consumed with the things the negative thoughts that I've always had, that I minimized all my other achievements. I minimized all my other efforts, all the other things that I have succeeded in. And so it's so important that if you're somebody that finds yourself stuck in that way of thinking, that maybe, book a session or two so that you can understand how did I get to this point? Who were the people that influenced my way of thinking? And your therapist will help find the evidence, so to speak. So we help you. We say, okay, what's the negative statement? How would you rate that from 0 to 100 or 0 to 10? How strongly do you believe that statement to be true? Now let's look for the evidence. So it's called a thought record, okay? And we start looking at some of the cognitive errors or dysfunctional thinking that you engage in, based off your history, based off your childhood upbringing, and so forth. And we help you see how all of these negative statements have held you back, have kept you from achieving the success that you are capable of achieving. And we do this through one technique. I'm just mentioning one technique, through a thought record, for example, where you start identifying the thought, you look for the evidence, you rate the thought, you look for the evidence, and then you find that the thought moves from a 9 or 8 to maybe a 2 and a 3 because there is no evidence to support that thought any longer. Right? We also help you to cognitively reframe some of the thoughts that you have about yourself and about others and how others perceive you. We teach you how to not look for external validation from others. I help you identify how you're self-sabotaging sometimes, right? So that whatever is happening to you in your life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because it aligns with what people have told you before, and it aligns with things that you have grown up with the self-limiting beliefs that you've grown up with. And so you start understanding that I can break that chain of thinking by changing the way I think. Remember, your thoughts are just thoughts, they're not the truth.